The birth operators are purely concerned with bringing particles into a flow. The delete operator, however, is used to remove particles from a flow under certain circumstances. Let's begin by having a look at the birth operator. We can see that we have a birth operator in this particular event here. It's currently set to emit particles from frame 0 to frame 25, and we're using a rate of 2500 particles per second. If I scrub through the timeline, you can see particles are emitted and then they're sent outwards by the speed operator in the same event. So, as I said, we have emission start, which defines the point that particles will start to be birthed into the event. We have emission stop, which again defines the point at which particles will stop being emitted into the event. And we have a toggle. We have an amount or we have a rate. These two work in different ways. The amount option allows you to emit the total amount of particles specified here during the period specified here. So in this case, in 25 frames, particle flow will emit 200 particles into the event. So if I scrub through, you can see that there we go, there are 200 particles. After frame 25, all the particles are in the event, and they continue flying outwards. Now, if I change it to rate, now it's doing 2500 particles in 1 second. We're currently using PAL, which you can see here, and that actually works at 25 frames a second. So that works out as 100 particles per frame. It's a little bit more difficult to work out maybe than using the amount value, because if you work in NTSC, obviously you have a different number of frames per second, and the same thing goes for film as well. So you always have to be aware that when you're entering a rate value, it's not actually per frame, it's per second. And therefore you have to work out the true value, i.e. the value per frame, by dividing by your current frame rate. So now if I scrub, you can see the particles are flying out, and I've got a lot more particles. It's actually, after frame 25, it's 2500 particles. And there they go, they all go flying off into the distance. And below this, you can see we have another parameter, which is just a display parameter, and that actually shows the total number of particles that will be birthed. And in this case, I've kept the values very easy to work out, so you can see that with an amount of 200, we get 200, and with a rate of 2500 over 25 frames, we get 2500 particles. If I change the emission stop to frame 50, we're now getting double the amount of particles. We're getting 5000 particles emitted over 2 seconds. So you can see there they go, they all go flying outwards. Now, if I change back to amount, even though the duration is increased, in other words, it's now 50 frames rather than 25 frames, the amount of particles is still the same. So you can see that these two methods for deciding on the amount of particles that you want to be emitted are useful for different circumstances. The final parameter is subframe sampling, and this is basically a parameter which is used to add extra quality to your particles. A common problem with emitting particles is that they are emitted at discrete points in time during a frame. In other words, once per frame, your 10 or so particles are emitted. This can give your particles a kind of puffing appearance, similar to steam pumping out of a steam train with a regular rhythm. Puff, 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 puff. And this rhythm is once for every frame of your frame rate. To remove this effect, you need to emit your particles during the entire period that a frame covers. This is achieved with this checkbox here. When on, particles are evenly emitted during the entire frame. However, this does slow down emission slightly, as particle flow has to break up each frame into smaller segments. So if this puffing effect is not an issue, turn this feature off and get slightly faster birthing. Okay, that's it for the birth operator. Let's move on to the birth script.